You're listening to the Page Pit. I'm here with Jake Ewings from the band Ebonivory from Australia. Their new album came out June 5th. It's called The Long Dream Eye. And you need to check it out. Jake, thank you so much for taking time to talk to me and welcome to the pit.
Thanks for having me. I love the pun. I love the show. I'm excited to be here.
I want to confirm. I pronounced everything right. The name of the band, the name of the
Yeah,
album.
yeah, which is
Okay.
which is a first really because it's a minefield between my last name and the band's name. Everybody's determined to get something wrong.
Doing a metal show, it really pushes you you have to pronounce a lot of strange things.
Oh yeah, well at least it's not black metal, like deciphering hieroglyphics.
Yeah. I'm not sure how to VJH is supposed to be pronounced.
Yeah, I don't think anybody knows how to pronounce. I know the band that we're all talking about, and I'm not going to try saying
Yeah, and that's why I haven't played them on the show. I would
it.
love to do that, but
That's a
you just
lesson
got
in
to pick a
marketing
name.
right there.
Exactly. So I like to kind of start with people's like origin stories and stuff like that. But before we get into that, just what have you been listening to lately?
I've really been digging Leprous' new album. I know I'm late to the party on that one. Um,
I was
and
too.
and Caligula's Horse's new album as well, which really surprised me because we all love the guys from Caligula's Horse. They're another local Australian prog band. They're from up Brisbane way, but their new album's incredible, and it's a really big step away from their sort of really traditional prog sound, and it's just so fantastic to sort of hear them spread their wings. So that's been on repeat for me.
Yeah, no, definitely. Anything else?
I think probably my most played Spotify track of the year so far is a song called Mr. Magic by Relica. They're another local prog band. Got to plug your mates. But they put out this single and it just is stunning. Check out Mr. Magic by Relica. It's Reliqa. At least you didn't have to pronounce that one.
Australia, you guys got so many prog bands. And since you just mentioned Leprous and this other band that you mentioned, both Australian, it's great that you're plugging your mates. And I try to do that with the show. Obviously, I have a Canadian content requirement, but there's a
Yeah,
lot of great Canadian bands. But Australia has really been on my radar the last couple of years because I got into Carnival. And then
yeah.
once I discovered them, it was like, oh, these guys. And then just more and more keep popping up. What
Well,
is it about Australia?
I don't know. I feel like it all comes back to Carnival because they're sort of like they're our forerunners really. Everybody in the Australian prog scene owes something to Carnival. But I don't know. I think the music scene here, just in general, is great. Like the metal scene overall is great. The pop and indie scene is great. Like there is just so much great music in Australia, and maybe it's because we're just a little bit geographically distant, where because we don't get the enormous um, North American bands touring through here as much as we'd like. I think just Aussie musicians just sort of stepped up to fill the gap, and we're just really lucky to be a part of that community. It's one of those things where the stronger it gets, the easier it gets. Like if we were the only prog band in the scene, God knows how we'd put on a show. But thanks to the fact that there's already so many great prog bands out there, it's so easy to put together a show or a tour up the East Coast or something like that where you can have really great local talent the whole way through and not have to worry about, filling it with a band that doesn't fit the spot or anything like that.
I think there's a lot of great points.
Mm.
So yeah, we need to get back into you though. I need to know about you and your origin story and stuff. So just if we could start off, how do you remember falling in love with music?
Oh, that's a deep question.
I know.
I remember I was really late to it as far as people go. I remember I had a friend in high school that would catch the bus to school together, and he showed me bands like Rage Against the Machine and Jane's
Yes.
Addiction and all like sort of alternative rock like that, Soundgarden, and I was just blown away. It was the first time I'd really heard heavy music. I mean, everybody listens to music, but it was just never really my thing. And then I heard all of these bands, and I was just like, wow, this is incredible. And I need to pick up a guitar, and I need to figure out how to play guerrilla radio right now because that's
Yes.
the most important thing in my life. And it just sort of really went from there. And now it's just a, a complete obsession. It's my it's all that I think about, really.
You totally got me with the Rage Against the Machine thing. That was my first favorite band,
Yeah, yeah.
and
I think I would probably call it the same. The first band that I listened to every album start to finish. I knew every word, and I was just like, I was 15 and furious at the world, and it was exactly what I needed at the time.
so Tom Morello must have had an influence on you. But are there other guitarists that you would also tip the hat to?
Uh, Definitely. I think I was a huge Guthrie Govan fan. He put out an
Oh,
album. A friend of mine sent it my way because it was. I think he downloaded it off LimeWire or something like that. He's like, you've got to check out this jazz fusion album, man. And I was like, yeah, righto. I listen to metal. This is gonna suck. And I listened to his guitar playing, and it just blew my mind. And I think he's one of the most versatile, talented guitarist in the world, and was just incredible. But aside from that, like, I also dig modern guitarists. There's a lot of great guitarists out there that are really sort of trailblazing. Like, after Eddie Van Halen, I think people thought, well, that's it for electric guitar. There's really not that much new aside from getting faster. And but then you've got new guitarists coming through playing thump and like fingerstyle and all sorts of things that you wouldn't expect in rock music, and it's like they're really pushing the instrument forward, and I really admire that because it's great to see guitar as an instrument still growing even now.
well, that's probably because you are a progressive artist. You like to see progression in the art itself, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, well, it's like guitar sort of. I love playing guitar, but at the end of the day, it's a means to an end. Like the instrument needs to serve the song, and it's just the instrument that I'm most comfortable playing, the instrument I'm most comfortable writing on. But if guitar falls out of relevance, and it's there's so much competition now with synthesizers and electronic sounds that if guitar doesn't keep growing as an art form to keep up with it, then it's going to drop off the radar. So it's great to see that there's still new sounds to explore, there's still new styles to explore with the instrument, so you don't have to just leave it by the wayside because as far as progressing, it's done. So it's fantastic to see people like Tosin Abasi, and now that's basically just spawned thousands of people imitating that style and further growing on it to make new interesting sounds.
Definitely, very well put. So let's start talking about Ebon Ivory. We need to know kind of the origins of how that all began.
Okay, so we've been together for, geez, a lot of years now. Probably 4 or 5 years, but there's been a few different lineups. So I wasn't in the original lineup. Louis was, but then Louis went away to uni for a couple of years, and then Louis came back, and really we were just sort of for a lot of years really sort of dragging our feet and not really sort of meeting our potential. We put out The Only Constant, which I still love as an album, and we put out Ebonivory 2, which was the second EP, and that's got a couple of really fantastic tracks on it. But like we were for a lot of years, playing the same local venues over and over again with the same bands. And I don't want to complain about that because look, I'm happy to always play guitar and drink a few beers. I'm never going to complain about that. That's pretty close to an ideal life. But the last sort of 12 to 18 months, we got picked up by Wild Thing Presents. That's our management and booking, and they really saw a potential in us, and we really doubled down on the performance. We doubled down on the music, and we all got together and said, "Hey, we want to take this a lot more seriously than we have been." And really, it's all just sort of come together. It's been a bit of a whirlwind the last 12 to 18 months because it's been a lot of work, but also we've achieved things that we didn't think was possible for a local prog band from rural Victoria. So it's just been fantastic.
I need to also know about the name, the origins of the name. So what does that mean to you?
So it's supposed to be. There's two different stories we tell about this. Joe, who is our original guitarist, is a black guy and Charlie is very, very white, and they started the band together. And this is the joke that we tell. It's because it was Joe and Charlie being black and white, but it's actually because it sounds too cheesy for the real story. That it's supposed to be the whole darkness and light thing. That there's the big heavy sections and the sad and the melancholy, and there's also these really bright, sparkly, happy melodies. Um, but I like the Joe and Charlie story more, so that's the one I usually tell.
It totally makes sense though. Like there is a lot of like heaviness in your music, but also a lot of light parts too. And I need to know more about like the writing process that went into this latest album, The Long Dream Eye, because this is the first part of a two-part concept album, right?
It was going to be um, three originally, a three-part concept album, and then we all sat down and realized that maybe we were getting a bit too big for our boots as far as releasing a three-part concept album, and the original plan was to release it as a triple CD, and then we, we realized that this is the most crack-brained idea that anybody's ever had, and so we'll do it as three parts, and that way we can actually get the album out instead of spending a decade on it. Um, and I think it started like musically. We usually start from like an exploration of like a music theory concept. So a lot of the songs have a backbone or a theme that is something that one of us wanted to explore rhythmically or melodically, like what's this going to sound like, is this what can we do with this weird polyrhythm, or what can we do if we play a song in 4/4 but we drop a 16th note at the end of every bar and then try and make it up later. So we get these um, ideas, and 90% of the time they're terrible and they don't make the cut. But 10% of the time you find something, unique that you wouldn't have written if you didn't really challenge yourself to come up with something that was um, a little bit experimental or a little bit outside of your comfort zone as far as writing goes. And that's where it started musically, or at least that's where the majority of the songs started. Some of the songs are written, really to serve a purpose in the greater narrative, like where the album will slow down. It's a conscious decision that we go, oh, well, at this point, this is where the story's heading. We need to put a slow, sad, melancholy song in there, and then we work towards that. But yeah, usually we start off with a terrible music theory idea and see if it works.
How do you, because I mean, with being a progressive artist, there's kind of this tightrope walk that you're always on, or like things are musical or technical, and you guys really know how to balance those two things. Your songs definitely have the technical side going on, but I can sing along with them. I can like headbang along with them. They're catchy. They're pleasing to the ear. So how do you know when you're doing too much?
What we like to do is we we really think it's a lot of fun to hide something complicated. So the idea at the end of the day is that the average listener, if they're not a musician, the idea is that they won't notice that we did something technical. So if it's, I mean, there's still showy bits, there's still guitar solos, and there's still like, crazy drum fills and stuff like that. And, the average listener is going to pick up on that. But as far as like the weird music theory concepts, we don't want anyone to know that we're playing in an odd time signature, or we don't want to know anyone to notice that we've dropped beats out of a rhythm and that we're going to make them up later. It should come naturally. It should still have that feeling and that rhythm. Otherwise, you're just going to alienate the listener from the story you're trying to tell and push them away from your music for the sake of showing off to all of the people about how great you are. And that doesn't serve the story and it doesn't serve the music. I think it's a lot more impressive when I see a band do something complicated and hide it really well. I think that's the cheekiest thing in prog.
Definitely. Cheeky is a good way of putting it.
It's a lot of fun. We started off with, there was an old song on The Only Constant called Silent Sirens, and I always use this as an example because it's basically a pop punk song, and it starts off, and headbang to it, and it's a straight up sort of four to the floor beat, and but it's in 7/4, and after two bars, everybody's out of time. The whole crowd's now nodding their head to the backbeat, and they don't know what happened. There, you see the look of confusion on their face when they go, "Hold on, I don't know how I got out of time with this song." And it's just like it's really sort of pleasing to trick the audience like that, and then they'll come back into it, and then two bars later they've lost it again, and then you can see the musicians in the crowd because they didn't lose it the whole time, and they're aware what you're doing.
Do you sometimes try to watch for that while you perform?
Oh yeah, every single time. Anytime it's a new audience, like if we play a local show in our hometown where everybody knows the songs, it's there's no fun in it because everybody's aware that it's coming. But like when we first started sort of touring up and down the east coast of Australia, we get to a new city and I just watch the audience at that exact moment when it changes over into the where everybody will be headbanging on the offbeat, and it's just puts a smile on my face every single time because I just think it's really fun to sort of trick the listener.
Definitely. And I think they appreciate it too.
Yeah, I think they it really piques their interest. I want them to go, "Hey, what happened here?" and then listen more closely next time.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, that would, as a myself as a listener, that's what would make me go pick up the album because I'd need to figure it out.
Yeah.
I want to know a little bit more about the concept behind the album without giving away too many spoilers or anything about the story. Is there some more that you can tell us?
um, a lot of it's really self-referential. Like the Long Dream Part One, let alone Part Two, has been really the last sort of 4 years of all of our lives, and throughout that 4 years, there's been a lot of ups and downs with us as people and us as a band. And it sort of tells that story going from, like I said, that sort of feeling of grinding away at the same thing over and over every day at the same venues or at your day job or whatever it would be, where you feel sort of a little bit trapped and hopeless through to what we're experiencing now, which is, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. There's a bit of hope, and it's not like you get into music to tour the world, but the fact that it might be possible is one of those things that really sort of brightens everything up. And so it tells that story a lot. It's certainly more personal than that, but that narrative of us as a band is reflected in the music because it really closely follows sort of the narrative of us as people at the same time.
So, do you think when you go into the album or have you already started writing this parts for the second album, actually?
Yeah, a lot of it's actually recorded. It's a weird thing to talk about because usually we would have a big album announced, but you don't release part one of an album. And I mean, there's gonna be a part two. We've already through quarantine, we've already been in the studio and stuff, and we actually recorded a lot of the drum parts for the next album when we recorded the drum parts for the Long Dream one. But there's still a lot of work to do. There's quite a few songs that need to be written and quite a few songs that need to be rewritten. You know how it goes. You write a song and then 6 months later you listen back to it and it's, God, what was I thinking? This needs to be redone from the ground up. So like, but we've definitely started on it and we're excited to sort of tell the second half of that story.
Are there any themes or melodies that we're going to hear return in a evolved kind of way?
Yeah, that's one of those things that we really wanted to set out to do from the start is make sure that those themes carry across. So I think it's fun always in writing a long piece of music like an album to reuse motifs, whether that's rhythmic or melodic, so that the listener keeps getting called back to the same sort of concepts, the same sense of continuity throughout it. And there's a few, this is where it's sort of been exciting as songwriters. There's a few melodies that we use as motifs throughout the album and a few rhythms that we use as motifs, but they're a little bit more subtle. But make a return in the Long Dream 2 that sort of transformed to tell a slightly different story. So it's going to be sort of harkening back, but at the same time moving forwards. That's the idea anyway. I don't know if we'll pull it off yet.
You're a seven-string guitarist. Uh,
Yeah, for
uh,
I play Ormsby Guitars. Shout out to Ormsby Guitars. They're a little guitar manufacturer out of Perth in Australia. They make fantastic multi-scale guitars. But I've been playing seven strings in general for a lot of years.
Definitely huge shout out to them. Beautiful, beautiful guitar.
Yeah,
I I creep you on Instagram and I just kind of go, oh wow, look at that
it's so fantastic.
thing. So, what made you decide to make the switch to a seven string?
It's just about like the versatility of sound. Um, I think it's the low E on a six string guitar, and if you tune it lower, like you can get a six string guitar down to C or maybe even B if you're really pushing it, or when it's standard scale and stuff. But it's still not that low, and that's sort of like limiting when it comes to a composition, especially if you're doing like a really guitar driven band. If you're only using a six string guitar, you're probably going to have some sort of melodic instrument in between bass and the guitar. There's a gap there when you have a six string guitar. But if you use a seven string guitar, you can sort of fill that gap down to the bass so that the whole composition is really full of sound. I mean, you don't always use the seven string. There's a lot of our songs that never use the lowest string, but it's nice to have it there as an option when you want to go low, when you want to really get down to the gritty sounds. And when you use a multi-scale instrument like Ormsby, that's the fan frets for anybody who's not aware. It means that the lowest string is actually quite a bit longer than the higher string, which lets you get even lower without losing intonation or tuning stability. So you can really get some unique sounds that you wouldn't usually expect out of a six string guitar.
I'm a seven string guitarist myself, I have to reveal too. And I've always loved having that extra range, but I've never really felt the need to go to the eight string range and start getting into Meshuggah territory. I was wondering what
Yeah.
your thoughts on that would be.
I've got an eight string here in the studio, but it doesn't get played that often. And there's a couple of our songs that actually use um, an eight string guitar, and then live we use the seven string, and then we've got the Axe effects to automatically patch switch to octave it down. So we just sort of cheat it for the live show because it's there's a middle ground, right, where the eighth string doesn't get used often enough to warrant having it there all the time. So it's like it's great to get that low, but once you get a distorted guitar, that low starts to sound a bit muddy, starts to sound a bit flubby, and it's no longer serving the composition. And there's bands do it well. I think Obzen by Meshuggah is probably one of my favorite albums ever, and it's just
Yes.
I call it I think it sounds like back pain as an album.
Yeah.
it's just it's just absolutely brutal and crushing. But if that's not the music you want to make, then the bass is sitting there in that exact same frequency range. It's filling that gap. I think the eighth string, for me personally at least, the eighth string there is just sort of pushing in on the bass's turf, and I'd rather leave that to the bass. In 90% of situations, like I said, there is music that we've got that uses eight strings, but it's pretty infrequent, at least infrequent enough that I'm not going to bring an extra eight string guitar with me on tour and like cart that around and change guitars in between sets, and it's not happening.
So, what other hobbies do you got other than music, other than playing guitar? What do you like to do?
Well, as I sit here in my studio, I'm surrounded by a record player I've disassembled to try and fix. That's that's this week's quarantine hobby. Um, and it's at this point I'm probably 3 weeks away from getting it fixed with parts on order and things like that. But I love pottering around the house. I've actually been really lucky with quarantine. I love gardening. I love um, video games far too much. The Long Dream Part 2 would probably be out by now if all of us played less video games. Um, I love fitness, and yeah, I love disassembling things and trying to fix them with varying degrees of success.
That's awesome. One thing I always love to kind of ask people kind of towards the end is what advice would you give to anyone who's just trying to pursue their dreams?
Oh, um, I mean, number one, get your performance tight. Get the product that you're trying to sell tight. And at the end of the day, that's what it is. Don't be one of those musicians that's just like, nah, man, it's all about the music. Because it is. It is all about the music when you're on stage, when you're in the studio, when you have a guitar in your hands. It is all about the music. But to be perfectly honest with you, what I've found in the last 12 to 18 months is that 90% of it, 90% of this job is trying to create a product, whether that be a performance, whether that be an album, that is good quality, and then finding a way to push that product out to people who may want to support it. And that's the big challenge where I think a lot of great bands fall down. I think there's if you go on Spotify right now, there's probably a million unsigned bands with less than 1,000 listens on all of their songs on Spotify that are the next Pink Floyd or the next Dream Theater or the next Metallica or whatever it be. And the difference between them and the band that succeeds is the work that they're putting in off the stage.
It's a fascinating thing to think about because it makes me think of the quote. I'm not sure where I got it from, but it's nothing more frustrating than having something to sell and nobody to sell it to. And
Yeah,
you kind of need to find your audience. So was that kind of like a part of the process for you guys? Was there any advice you could give to someone to like kind of navigate that?
I think it's a lot of it's about networking. Is that so much of this business is social, and that's the bit that I really love. I love coming on interviews, and I love meeting people at shows and stuff like that. Like, go out and be an active part of your music scene and your sort of local music community and push your stuff everywhere. You can't just sit in your room and expect it to happen, and it can't expect an audience to come to you. Go out there, support other people, and then ask them to support you. And if you've got good music, if you've got a good performance, then that should come naturally.
Very well put. Is there anything else that you would like to let our listeners know?
Uh, the obligatory, I've been finishing every interview and things like that with stay safe. I know that we're really lucky here in Australia with everything going on that things aren't quite as bad as they could be, but I understand a lot of the world's in a rough spot. Um, stay healthy, stay home if you can. Um, and yeah, take care of each other. Oh, reach out to people in your local music scene. I think a lot of us metalheads specifically, a lot of our social lives revolve around shows and the people we meet at shows, and we see our friends at shows, and that's our that's our social bread and butter. And with that gone, I think a lot of us are feeling lonely, feeling separate. So reach out to your friends, um, try and catch up, have a Skype call, just support each other. That's it.
That's really important. I think there's especially in metal, like we love going to the shows, we love supporting the bands, and then when that gets taken away, we're all just left being lonely. And a lot of us have a big, wall, right, where we don't want to let people in, be vulnerable, and admit that, it'd be nice to talk to somebody and get that kind of virtual hug. So
Yeah.
you heard it from Jake Ewings, everybody. It's metal to care.
Hell yeah.
Thank you so much for taking time to talk to me, man.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. I hope to do it again when the next one comes out.
Yeah, it'd be fantastic. Well, hopefully we'll be up your way with a tour before the next one comes out. Fingers crossed. God knows what's going on with the world right now.
Yeah, you were supposed to be in North America right now.
Yeah, it's supposed to have a 26 show tour, and oh well, we're healthy. That's
Well, when you start setting out on tour, make sure you make your way up to Penticton, BC, because I know there'll be a crowd here to see you guys.
awesome.
Great. All right. Take care of yourself. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Eric.